In case you missed it yesterday, a big announcement was made. Dylan Raiola announced he is headed to Athens to join the Georgia Bulldogs. It's been a very hotly contested recruitment between Nebraska and Georgia and several other schools. Those are really the final two. And to help us break it down, somebody who's been all over it for quite some time. Blaine Gilmer from UGASports.com. You can follow him on Twitter at BGilmer18. Joins us now. Blaine, what's going on, man? How we doing?
Danny, how are you doing? The thousands and thousands of dog fans over on the Dog Net specifically wanted me to tell you good morning and how you're doing this morning, Danny. So they're a big fan.
I can feel just the heartfelt warmth that's coming from the Georgia Bulldog Nation headed my way, and I appreciate you relaying that message. Make sure you do the same for me. So you've been all over this, Dylan Raiola. There was a lot of people that thought Nebraska was going to land him. Nebraska fans this morning feeling very upset that they lost out on this one. How has this unfolded as you've followed this? What made Dylan Raiola choose Georgia ultimately over Nebraska?
It ultimately came down to relationships. And I know people are going to think, well, his dad went to Nebraska, but ultimately when it comes down to it, it was a relationship that Dylan forged, and Georgia was the first school to offer Dylan back in 2021. As a freshman, coming out of his freshman year, Buster Faulkner, who's now offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech, they brought him into camp with help of Matthew Stafford, Sean Chappis, guys that you guys are familiar with from NFL ranks and all that. That they helped get him over there to camp, and once Georgia saw him, they fell in love with him, offered him, and the relationship has kind of grown ever since then. And people were kind of shocked when he pulled the commitment to Ohio State because for all the world, it looked like, hey, Georgia was going to be in there to land him the first go around, but when it comes down to it, they felt like they may have rushed that Ohio State commitment a little bit. He decommits, and now Mike Bobo picks up where Todd Monken kind of left off, and the relationships with Kirby Smart, Bobo, Montgomery Van Gorder, all these guys on staff really are kind of what landed Dylan at Georgia.
Blaine, I got to say, great to have you on, man, and excellent job by you through all this. I got stuff that you sent me back from January. You never strayed. You always believed that Georgia was going to be the landing spot for Dylan, so a big congratulations to you. And one thing that I know, at least myself, why I thought Nebraska, his uncle is the O-line coach. He's my old teammate, Donovan Raiola. How big of a factor did the people even like you think that could potentially play in him deciding to go not just where his father played, but where his uncle is currently coaching? I mean, that tells me that what you're talking about from a relationship standpoint, that must have been one heck of a job by Kirby Smart and his staff.
Yeah, it was, and that was honestly a big piece. The family ties, the ties to the Raiola family with his dad, of course, being in the Ring of Honor there and all of that stuff was kind of why Nebraska got as hard of a look as they did. Ultimately, when it came down to it, USC probably finished second in this commitment behind Georgia. But at the end of the day, when the decommitment happened December 17th of 2022, Kirby Smart and Dylan Raiola were on the phone with each other almost immediately. And the way that it was framed to me from people in and around this recruitment is that the communication between Kirby Smart and Dylan Raiola in the coming weeks after that decommitment was more than Dylan had with Brian Day in Ohio State during the entire time he was committed to him from March to December of 2022. So I got to give a lot of credit to Kirby Smart. I think that speaks a lot to what you and Danny speak about a lot of times with these head coaches and how it's changing. You have to become a CEO of a program. People got to realize Ryan Day during that whole season was having to focus on game planning and calling plays and all that kind of stuff. Kirby Smart really has coordinators in place that you can kind of delegate that to, and he's just intense and maniacal about recruiting all the time. 19, 20-hour days that this guy's putting in. He's kind of a machine over there, so you wonder how long he can sustain that health-wise. But Kirby Smart had, and his relationship with Dylan had a big influence on that as well.
No doubt. He absolutely crushes it. Georgia's been consistently either 1, 2, or 3 with Kirby Smart in the recruiting rankings. With Dylan Raiola specifically, he's the number 1 rated player, not only quarterback, but player in that 2024 class, according to 24/7 Sports. Where does he rank among the, in maybe just even the Kirby Smart era? Is this the best, biggest haul, that best player that Kirby's got since he's been there?
I think it's the most important. It's subjective when you talk about other positions and things like that, and obviously there's been tremendous amount of talented guys like Nakobe Dean and people like that have mattered so much to Georgia's program. But when you're talking about the influence that Dylan Raiola has and the combination of how high his floor is plus how high his ceiling is and the relationships and respect he has amongst his peers in the recruiting ranks, like, for example, number 1 ranked receiver in the country, Jeremiah Smith, will be in Athens this weekend on an official visit, and Dylan Raiola just so happens to be coming into town during the same weekend. So this thing's going to have ripple effects throughout the class of 2024 and the class of 2025, and it's going to be very influential amongst the recruiting ranks and how people perceive the position of quarterback at Georgia going forward. Now it's kind of incumbent, okay, Kirby has done this before, right? He's been able to bring in 5-star quarterbacks. Now we'll see what happens with Dylan, but I will say that I think Dylan Raiola is the most polished quarterback coming out of high school that Kirby Smart will have brought in.
Great players would have played other great players, especially pass catchers and quarterbacks. We see that every year when these top quarterbacks go. Typically, receivers will follow. We're talking with Blaine Gilmer, recruiting analyst, UGASports.com, also contributor, Southeastern14.com. He's been all over this Dylan Raiola story for quite some time now. I'm curious about, so two-parter here, Blaine. For the people like myself that don't follow recruiting as closely as you, what do you like about Dylan Raiola? What's made him the number 1 player? Athleticism, arm strength, tell me about him as a player. And then I'm curious, just that quarterback room. What does this do for Brock Vandegrift? I know just him sticking around after this last portal window I thought was a big win for Coach Mark, because we all expect Carson Beck to be the starter. But now with a guy like Dylan Raiola coming in, what is Brock Vandegrift? How does he feel about this?
The first part, you guys know Coach Jim Donnan. He works with us at UGA Sports, former Georgia coach, and he told me one time, he said, Blaine, I've never seen a talented quarterback with thick ankles, and Dylan Raiola doesn't have thick ankles. Let's say that. This guy's got skinny ankles, but his legs, his quads, his calves, his entire body, he gets mistaken all the time when they go to these training sessions for, is that an NFL guy over there working out? He's got that kind of body, 6'3", 225 pounds, runs a high 4.7 40, can throw off platform, and the different arm angles that you see Patrick Mahomes and all those guys so forth. Dylan patterns his game after Patrick Mahomes, and he trains with the same guy that Patrick Mahomes trained with. Plus, when you're talking about what you're getting a guy who his dad played at an elite level at center for 14 years in the NFL. So you're getting a guy who knows about protections. He knows about different fronts. He knows about pressures that are going to be coming at him. He's learned a lot just being around him, these conversations at the kitchen table. So that's kind of why he's ranked as high as he is, because of the football acumen and the God-given ability. But then you talk about the quarterback, how this impacts. You got to figure that Carson Beck's going to be the guy this year, but simply because of, his stature, his physical size, his ability, and his talent that's going to be around him at Georgia, you got to think he's going to be very successful and probably have a chance to go to the NFL after this year. Now the question is, what happens with Gunnar Stockton and Brock Vandegrift? You got to figure one of those guys would probably leave the program after maybe spring, get through the competition, maybe that next spring competition window or portal window. And then you got 2 guys. Dylan Raiola is not the only quarterback in this class for Georgia. Ryan Puglisi, who is from the New England area, he is committed to Georgia. And fully intends on staying in the class. Everybody in the world reached out to him and says, what is this going to do to you? He says, hey, I'm still coming to Georgia because Georgia needs 2 quarterbacks in this class because of what's probably going to be leaving.
I thought it was interesting something you said there. I'm curious to know your thoughts on Carson Beck, who's, he's been handed the reins of this dynasty. And, it's hard when you look at who are you going to, we haven't made our picks. We're not even close to that point of the season yet. But with Georgia's schedule, it's hard to go down the list and say, where's the loss? They're going to be stacked with talent across the board, but that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on Carson Beck taking over this offense. Stetson Bennett, who, I was hard on, his first year starting, you had to recognize what he did over his course of his career. Is Carson Beck just going to step in and kind of take over the reins and everything is smooth sailing? Is that what you would expect?
I don't think anybody would dispute that Carson Beck is more talented, naturally gifted than Stetson Bennett. 6'4", 215 pounds, can throw it a mile. Where Carson Beck is going, to your point, Danny, is going to have to prove himself is when you get in a situation like Stetson Bennett did against Missouri last year, where they need you to come back and lead them back in the fourth quarter, where against Ohio State, where you need a couple drives there late in the fourth quarter to get things going. Stetson Bennett was, as Bill Raftery says, onions, right? The dude had it. He was there in those clutch situations. Can Carson Beck do that? And to your point, he may not be tested until November 18th when they go to Knoxville. That's seriously as long as it could happen, because this Kirby Smart squad, this Georgia team in 2023, is going to be probably the fastest in terms of team speed that Georgia has had his entire time here, and that doesn't bode well for the other competition leading into that Tennessee game.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't bode well at all. Give us a quick a scout of the team overall. Play devil's advocate, Blaine. I know that you know this team inside and out. If they have a flaw or a weakness or an area that could be something that we see them like, not quite as good as we thought. Where is it? Is it the O-line? And they've been so good on the O-line. Is it somewhere on defense? They just keep pumping out player after player. Is there an area that you think potentially could be a weakness for this team, or no, they're stacked everywhere?
They have to, of course, Keely Ringo, who admittedly at times, had his troubles, but a great athletic corner is gone in terms of his athleticism and his experience. So they're lacking experience at one of the corner positions. They're lacking a little bit of experience back at one of the safety positions with Chris Smith having gone. 2 guys that have been around, had a lot of success. So maybe some inexperience on the back end. And also, of course, Bear Alexander left and went to USC, and Jalen Carter is gone out of the interior of the defensive line. Having said that, there's plenty of bodies and plenty of guys who have played over there. But when you lose some of those special talents, okay, and like Danny said with Carson Beck replacing Stetson Bennett, when the bullets are flying, how do people step up and how do people react in those situations? So I think a couple of those key positions. Then running back, I think they're looking for that guy who's going to step up. Kenny McIntosh was great and kind of followed in the tradition of running backs for Georgia. But do they have really an elite running back? But I think to what you said about the offensive line, Danny, bad news for people. Georgia had 2 offensive linemen drafted last year. They're probably going to have 3 drafted after this year. So it's the rich get richer in terms of the offensive line for Georgia. But that running back, maybe interior defensive line, and the secondary would be some question marks that they still have to look at.
Blaine, I'm curious. You mentioned something there about Bear Alexander going to USC. My read on it, now you tell me if I'm wrong, is that Georgia they could keep anybody, right? They've got collective money. They've got the resources to keep anybody they want to. That they were okay with him going to USC. Is that the way you read it too, or is this something that they lost, that they're upset? Like that was a critical piece of the defense for the 2023 season?
Nobody, especially somebody as competitive as Kirby Smart, wants to lose somebody of that ilk, that talent. Bear Alexander is extremely talented. I don't know, based on stuff that we've heard at UGASports, that he was necessarily in lockstep with the culture at Georgia and maybe with the fit and things like that. And when you get some of the offers that he got in the NIL world, because let's be honest, we know, I'm not talking about just against Georgia, I'm talking about every situation out there. We know tampering's wild in college football. And, hey, the young man went and took advantage of some NIL. But I think from a talent standpoint, I hate to lose him, I'm not so sure that it's, doom and gloom in terms of a culture standpoint.
I think that's exactly right. Blaine, you're the man. I'm sorry, obviously Danny can maybe rub some of you dogs the wrong way, but Blaine, it's Dusty Dog here. So, I mean, there's no way. We're big fans of the Georgia program, as you know, but, I mean, come on, if the Dog fans had to choose between one of us, I mean, they're going with Dusty Dog over a Florida State quarterback all day, right, Blaine?
Oh, we see on the legendary Dog vent, I see post every week or so about, man, that Dusty Dvorak, he's really riding with the Dogs, and it almost makes us nervous. Kind of like Danny's nervous about everybody jumping on the FSU bandwagon right here. They did want one of our biggest posters, Danny, PA Dog, that wanted me to ask you, is FSU back? He wanted your opinion on that. Are you going to go on record and say it?
Yeah, that's great.
I hate that question, and I think you know that. I think he probably does too, because I'm not saying we're back until we win a title. That's what I refuse. We're on our way back. That's what Mike Norvell said. Blaine, you're awesome, man. Thanks so much for the time, man. It's great stuff.
Thanks, Blaine.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys.
Appreciate it.
I want to Sam Ellinger.
UGASports.